Thanks, man.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to what I hope will be the single most interesting hour you spend at Global Conference this year. Human performance. It's not just about athletic achievement and physicality. A lot of people think it is, but we're going to go far beyond that today. Human performance is really about challenging yourself intellectually, emotionally, creatively, culturally, to make the most of this one life that we have. And it's about putting yourself in the arena, as we saw in the quote from Teddy Roosevelt, to give yourself and your teams and your organizations a chance to achieve the extraordinary, however you may define that. So the 5 other people I have on stage today have put themselves in the arena and achieved truly historic results in each of their fields. I guess I'll sit down now. What can we learn from them? This hour will be about the techniques, the mindsets, the thoughts, the tools that all of you and all of your teams and organizations can take away from all of these folks to be better performers. You don't all need to be elite, but you need to be pushing your edge. You're going to hear a lot about that. Joe Dumars. Where's Joe? Joe Dumars is a 3-time NBA champion, 2 as a player, 1 as a front office executive for the Detroit Pistons. He was not only the leading scorer on the bad boy Pistons of the 80s, but he was also its best defender, a historically good defender in the NBA. While playing on a team with a lot of pugnacious players, Joe was also known as a great sportsman. In fact, the NBA trophy handed out every year for sportsmanship was renamed the Joe Dumars Trophy. And Michael Jordan, well, give it up for Joe. Joe had some historic battles with Michael Jordan, and Jordan said that Joe was the best defender he ever faced. Colin O'Brady, to my left, became the first person to trek solo across Antarctica, unsupported and unaided. Finished that in, I think that was December 26th. You completed that journey. For 54 consecutive days, Colin pulled a sled weighing almost 400 pounds across 930 miles of the abyss. And he achieved, I think, one of his 4 world records in the process. Jessica Green, to my right, is a nuclear engineer. I'm going to have to look at my notes for this, apologies. A nuclear engineer and ecologist who ventured into biodiversity theory to study the ubiquitous microbiome around us. And you're going to hear more about that tomorrow in the Blow Your Mind session. She's an internationally recognized, let's give it up for Jessica too, why not? She's an internationally recognized leader in microbiome science, and she launched a company that harnesses the power of the global microbiome. But she's a lot more than a scientist, and you're going to hear about that today in this hour also. Andy Walsh is one of the world's leading experts in human performance, or what he calls human factors. Andy and his group work with teams as diverse as the elite Tier 1's military special operations, the U.S. Olympic teams, Jeff Bezos and his crowd, Cirque du Soleil, DARPA, and some other folks that Andy can't talk about. And of course, to my left also, give it up for Andy. Sure, why not? And then we have Gene Simmons, last but not least, one of the most famous rock and roll legends ever. Kiss. Thanks, buddy. You said it was going to be 20. Kiss, the band he co-founded, is one of the best-selling bands of all time, having sold, I think, more than 100 million records, including 26 gold albums, which I think Gene will tell you is also a record. Gene is also a highly successful serial entrepreneur, polymath, polyglot. The guy speaks Hungarian, German, Hebrew, some Japanese, and occasionally English.
English, yeah.
So my first question is to Gene. Gene,
oh. Am I on, by the way?
You're on.
Okay.
Gene, you said in an interview in 2017 with Inc. magazine, this is a quote, the best thing you can do is figure out who you really are. What do you mean, and why did you say that?
I'm pretty much an odd duck on this panel, so I I come from Israel. I know I don't look Swiss. And when I first came to America as a legal immigrant, because there is a difference, I came with my mother, who's a concentration camp survivor of Nazi Germany when she was 14 years of age. And I had an advantage. I had the alpha mom of all time, my mother, who, despite her hardships, thought about America, Amerika, which is how she would pronounce the name in thick Hungarian. Her beloved and wonderful America, where she was finally safe, finally free, finally able to be who she wanted to be here. And I often come off when I read my interviews or hear myself talking as a kind of a, oh boy, this guy uses sound bites. I'm forever grateful to America. See, I'm getting choked up. I do business symposiums and talk to corporate folks. Everybody talks about Wall Street and venture capital and all the great things that America has done, including flying through the air, invented here. Talking on the phone, invented here. Turning night into day, light bulbs, invented here. By people. Everybody talks about entrepreneurial spirit, a silly French word we can barely spell. And yet everybody forgets about America.
So, Gene, what about that question about who you really are? Gene knows that I'm going to interrupt him, by the way. It's okay.
Well, I'm more interested in what I have to say. So, the truth of it is you better figure it out in an early age. And social media is your enemy because all your friends and neighbors will have an opinion. And my suggestion to all of you is run your race your way. Look straight ahead. Don't look at the peanut gallery. Somebody will always have something to say about it. Arch your back proudly. The taller you are, the faster you'll see the predators coming at you. When we were Australopithecines on the plains of Africa, the taller ones saw the predators coming. Just run your race, be all you can be, which is our military term, and the rest of it doesn't count. Not everybody liked Jesus either. But I just want to add, before I suck up all the oxygen in the room, I'm not a politically correct person. People talk about achievements in the human spirit and words like that. I'm a pragmatist to the extreme. Without money, nothing is possible. I don't care if you're the Pope in the Vatican, a rock band, Michael and his wonderful symposiums and all that stuff. Money is the fuel of it. And I'm telling you, even the asshole who's worth billions of dollars, who never gave a penny to charity, is still making life better on earth by building yachts and estates because you're giving jobs to people and that feeds their families. A poor person never gave me a job. These are not romantic notions. Oh, you're picking up. It's the wrong I'm telling you, we better all wake up to two ideas. One, America is the finest place on the face of the planet. Two, more money is more better. Warren Buffett gets up every day and goes to work, not because he needs another dollar. Yes, he does. And he'll stop off and get a McDonald's, if you don't know, for $3.29. Or if the market's not doing so well, he might get $2.50. But the point is he goes to work because your body, your brain, the acquisition of more, that's a good thing. I'm telling you, the acquisition of more is a good thing. We're told, because we're remnants of the Puritan ethic, you're not supposed to, when is it enough? Tell you what, if you ever meet a loser who says, I just want enough money to get by, give him my information, because any dollar that fool doesn't want, I will gladly take.
So with that, thank you, Gene. So let me turn to Andy.
Don't ask me a question after that.
What did he just, so Andy, can you define, you're the guy who talks about human performance, human factors all the time. What is human performance, and what do you do with your clients to help them push their edges?
Well, it's a great question. I think we've had the good fortune for many years of surrounding ourselves with people like the group on this panel, and our responsibility was to try and understand how they achieved the level of success they did. And you can kind of see in the slide behind us. We started to frame things up in these basic models. So human performance for us was the understanding of excellence or mastery within the constructs of these models for two reasons. One, so we could support people like Gene and try and help them understand what they were doing and then maybe open their eyes up to some opportunities. More importantly for us is once you have a framework for this excellence or mastery based on a model like the one behind us, you can then democratize that information. You can share it to that next generation. So one element, I guess, in our way of thinking is that it's about understanding world-class performance for the sake of that particular effort itself, but more importantly, taking all that information and giving it out or sharing it more broadly to have a greater impact on the society.
Thank you. I want to go to Joe. Joe, you have talked about the difference between true talent and true champions. Mm-hmm. You obviously spent a lot of time on the court, but also picking players as a front office executive. Tell me what you mean by the difference between true talent and true champion.
A lot of times with just true talent, that's it. That's all they rely on. And over the years, I can tell you that's just not enough to be a true champion, just having talent. You have to have something extremely deep inside of you that pushes past failure. Because I've said to people all along that, look, anybody that talks to you about success, if they don't talk to you about failure, they're not giving you the whole story. Because somewhere along the line, you're going to fall, you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. And true champions, they get up and push past that.
So is that something that people can learn, or do they already have it inside them? And if they aren't born with it, how do you get it?
I've seen it both, because I've seen guys who naturally have it, and I've seen guys who've learned it. It's the environment you create. You can create an environment where a guy who's just dependent on true talent, he's either going to conform or he's going to bail out. Mm-hmm. And what you can't do is adjust the environment. Keep that environment where everybody there knows we have to push past failure. I've seen a lot of guys flip, learn it, and become champions.
So you were the guy who had to shut down Michael Jordan.
Something like
that. Sometimes you did, sometimes you didn't.
Yeah.
How did you prepare for those battles?
So I've told the story. Before every game, I would go into a little small room, pitch black, headphones on, and right outside that door was the locker room. Loud music, a lot of stuff going on. And for me, it was to get my heart rate down and be completely away from everything and visualize the entire game. Visualize what I thought Michael was going to do, visualize what I thought the Bulls were going to do, or the Lakers, or whoever we were playing. I had to visualize it in a quiet space. And once I had it, then I could get up, go on the court, and just play at ease then.
So seeing what you were going to achieve before you achieved it, you're saying, was part of...
Absolutely. Visualization was huge for me.
Okay.
Every night I had to see it before I could go on the court and do it.
All right. So, Jessica, I want to ask you something you told me the other day about... you said that someone you worked with or a mentor had mentioned to you that living on the edge of the primal vortex was something you needed to get comfortable with. Tell me what that meant and what you did.
So I think part of what you're speaking to is fear. Mm-hmm. And I have learned through different parts of my life how to cope with fear in different ways. Mm-hmm. And one of those is just recognizing that it's coming, mm-hmm. feeling it, welcoming it, mm-hmm. getting your heart rate down, mm-hmm. and knowing you're going to get through it. But because we're animals, it's a part of our wiring to have a flight or fight mm-hmm. or response. And so this mentor of mine said, if you don't have fear on a regular basis, you're never going to succeed. And he told me to picture being like a superhero movie where there's this vortex and there's a superhero that's hanging on to the edge of the vortex, and that you should constantly feel that way. Mm-hmm. And if you can learn to hang out on the vortex and remain calm, then you can do great things.
Well, Michael was the vortex for me, so fear was a big part of it, I can assure you.
I'm going to ask you later about a particular point in your NBA career. I want to ask Colin O'Brady a question about not only what you did in Antarctica, but the training that you had to accomplish to be successful. And you had said, Colin, that only 10 to 20% of that achievement was physical. The rest was mental resilience. How did you prepare for that? And what do you mean by, what did you do mentally?
So the Antarctica crossing that I just completed had been sort of attempted in various formats for about 100 years, going back to Ernest Shackleton in 1914, who kind of put it out there, humans should cross Antarctica. And of course, as we invented, kites and vehicles and modes of transport and airplanes, people did that crossing in various capacities, but still the sort of solo, unsupported, unaided nature, meaning sort of mano-a-mano against Antarctica, had never been completed. But many people had tried, including a couple of very prolific British explorers. In 2015, a guy by the name of Henry Worsley made it 100 miles from the finish line, and after 71 days, unfortunately died. Yeah. Another prolific guy, tried crossing, ran out of food, and had to be rescued. And so people started to say, like, look, this crossing is impossible. There's been all sorts of writing on it that says, humans can't do this because you can't carry enough food if you're not getting resupplied. How can you do it? And so I think that it's an interesting, the reason that I took on the challenge, I didn't know if it were possible or not, but I knew that if I believed it was possible, I would at least have a better chance of success in preparing my body. So of course, as a professional athlete, I have done the laps, done the training, got myself fit. I added 20, 30 pounds to my body. I was putting my hands in ice buckets and solving math equations, all this kind of crazy training that I did. But ultimately, it came down to when you're alone in Antarctica for 54 days, by yourself, the harshest, windiest, coldest place in the world, the sun never sets, 24 hours of daylight, where do you go in your mind? I equate it to, I say it's like going to a party and inviting all of your angels and demons. You're there with just everyone in the room, and you can't hide from yourself. So to me, that was either going to be my greatest asset or my greatest sort of downfall out there, and I chose to really prepare my mind. I didn't realize it at the time, but going back all the way to 2011, I went to one of my very first 10-day Vipassana meditation retreats, which is 10 days, no reading, no writing, no eye contact, and that's become a daily practice for me to figure out, I believe that the strongest muscle that any of us have, whether it's music, whether it's high performance, basketball, whatever, is this muscle right here, the 6 inches between our ears, and the way that we flex and develop that really dictates the success we ultimately have.
You have a phrase that you use, chop wood, carry water?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I think that, I was talking to Joe before we got on here. He's, Detroit Pistons beat my hometown Portland Trailblazers in 1990 for the championship. It's fun to talk about, the championship days. He broke my heart when I was a little kid, but I'll
whatever. He broke my heart too as a Chicago Bulls fan.
But. And it's great. I set this world record, or I have 4 world records. I can talk about being on the summit of Everest, or these sort of epic moments, or I'm sure a show that you played in front of, hundreds of thousands of people, whatever.
Yesterday.
But, yeah, exactly. But what it comes down to, I think, I'm guessing everyone on the stage would probably agree, is that it's that hard work ethic in the downtimes when no one's looking. And so that chop wood, carry water is that process of diving deep into the process when there's no accolades, there's no camera on you, no spotlight. That's when the hard work comes. And the championship moment, the culmination of that is really a byproduct of all of those quiet moments by yourself, chopping wood, carrying water, continuing to work hard in the process.
Okay. And Gene, when we spoke previously, your background, people may not know, but you mentioned that you were born in Israel, not in the United States. Your mom, as you mentioned, Holocaust survivor. You came to the United States.
Holocaust is not a fair word. You have to be specific because it gives a pass.
What do you call it?
Nazi concentration camps
okay.
in World War II.
You came to the...
That's accurate. The Holocaust can apply to all sorts of things. Specifically, my mother was in a German concentration camp.
Fair enough. You came to the United States, Gene, a boy, your name was Chaim Witz.
That's the Ashkenazi phrase. The Sfaradi correct way is Chaim Witz.
And then at age 9, you changed your name to Eugene Klein, correct?
Yeah.
And then you eventually became Gene Simmons. At age 9, you changed your name. You had said that you had talked about your childhood as you always loved being the center of attention. You would do anything to be the center.
Well, it's more profitable.
Is that why you did it as a
Well,
child?
I'm being serious. If you're unknown, money just passes you by.
That's a $100 million tongue, right?
Probably a little bit more.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, America invented the notion of celebrity. Our royalty is celebrity itself. Not everybody, granted, but we don't have kings and queens. But the kings and queens of other countries aren't worshipped around the world. I am. And celebrity itself makes money. So I changed my name for pragmatic reasons. Yes, I'm proud of where I come from and all that stuff, and your family is upset because you're getting rid of your name. It's been a joke. Who gives a fuck? At the end of the day, dress British, think Yiddish. Figure out what works. When in Rome, do as the Romans. I didn't invent any of this stuff. You want to make it difficult for people to get access to you? Make sure your name is Lipschitz. Really? Really? Your Lipschitz? How do you spell that? You don't want to. You want to make it easy to get people to. So, and by the way, in the rock world, I have this outfit on with this silly hair and a long tongue and stuff like that. If I was working at Goldman, I might be behind bars. Oops. If I was working at Goldman, I'd wear that outfit. Everything, Shakespeare was right. The world is a stage, we're all just players, and we wear the costumes. I'm completely flexible. I just want to get to the end point and win, whatever it takes. And so I forgot your question because I love the sound of my own voice.
That's okay, you answered it. Just give me the other $19 after the session. Andy, you've talked about cognitive performers. What is a cognitive performer?
Yeah, cognitive performer is a sort of industry term now, getting much more popular, is where we've obviously in the past focused heavily in the growth of our industry in the athletic environment, the government environment. Now we're seeing the best performers and the highest performance with the greatest consequences are in the purely cognitive realm. So people who are not physically dominant and people who are making a lot of decisions in an increasingly complex world, it could be any of you in the room, who are mastering all those inputs, all that information, making split-second decisions, and those split-second decisions have big consequences. And unfortunately in our space, we've sharpened all our tools in the physical and a lot of the psychological side of the shop, but really focusing on how to improve that aspect is, we don't have many tools in the shed. So that cognitive performer is becoming such an important part of the work that we're all involved in because and it's exciting because we get to start to think about how do we make the scientists better? How do we get to make people solving big problems better? We've just done a few programs with heart surgeons and really sharpening that sort of side of the equation. So that's where it's all coming from.
So, Jessica, I want to ask you, I want to move from the cognitive side, which I think we'll touch on again, and as I mentioned to the panelists before we got on, anybody and everybody can jump in at any point in this conversation to ask any of us a question. But Jessica, I wanted to ask you, people may not know, but you have degrees, I believe, in nuclear engineering and
Civil engineering.
Civil engineering, and yet you said one of your most creative professional, one of the most creative moments in your professional career was when you were skating roller derby in Oregon.
That's true, yeah.
And you were the jammer. Explain what a jammer is on roller derby and explain why roller derby connected to your professional creativity.
So I skated for 3 years on the flat track Furies, and the jammer is the person who has a star on their helmet, and they're the person who makes the points. So you have two jammers from both teams line up on the start line, the whistle blows, and it's the jammer's job to skate the fastest and go past the blockers on the other team, and it's the job of the blockers on the other team to make sure that you don't get past them. So, you know, people like Slapcat were my worst enemy as a jammer. But around this time, I was doing a little bit of work with Andy Walsh at Red Bull, and I realized that when I was skating roller derby, my brain was actually at a peak cognitive performance. So I think I was performing even higher than when I run regularly and do things like that. But when you have to be acutely aware of what's going on spatially in your environment, otherwise you might get knocked to the ground on 8 wheels, I think it changes your brain chemistry. I don't know, it would be really interesting to hear you speak about that, about the relationship between sports performance and cognitive performance.
Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, like, it's just a heightened sense of awareness because, in a split second, it can go horribly wrong. So you really have no room to drift. You have to be locked into exactly what you have to do. And very few other things put you in that state where you feel like one mistake here and it's all over. Most places you get to redo, you get to explain. Not in sports, not when you're doing what you're talking
So
about.
what you're describing, each of you in your own ways, is, again, go back to the phrase, putting yourself on an edge, where the margins of failure are very small, if they exist at all. And there are ways to do that physically, there are ways to do that cognitively. Colin, I guess I want to ask you about, in your training, as we talked about, a lot of mental toughness, a lot of mental resilience training. You've talked about doing an annual retreat, a silent meditation retreat, and you do this every year, as I understand it. Tell us what that is about and what you get out of it.
For me, like I said, I'm always looking for different ways to sort of cultivate my mind and really kind of flex that muscle. I've been going to these 10-day silent Vipassana meditation retreats. So it's 10 days of silence, no reading, no writing, no eye contact, pretty much cut off from the rest of the world in deep meditation. And I did that before ever meditating a single minute in my entire life for the first time in 2011. And it's been a really meaningful practice for me to sort of get to know myself better, to go inside and go deeper. But really, as it applies, I think, to human performance, it's been a way to access heightened performance of flow in terms of my own brain and cognitive ability. I mean, at the end of my Antarctica crossing, I had averaged about 15 miles per day over the course of that journey. And then on the 53rd day, I was 30 pounds lighter. My bones were protruding from my ribs and my hips. I was running out of food, and I knew that someone had died, pretty near the finish line previous to me. But I woke up on that morning and kind of found this place in my brain that I'd never been in before with this depth. And I actually ended up going continuously for 32 hours straight, 77 miles continuous in this sort of deep flow state to finish this project in kind of one last Herculean effort. If on the outside, I think it looks like, oh, wow, he kind of like figured out this physical strength inside of him. But what I would say is I tapped into something in my mind in a place where time was passing like never before. If you're struggling for at the beginning of the project, the first day, I'm struggling for the first like minute or two. And I'm like, okay, my sled's so heavy. I'm going to keep pulling this. Okay, I'm in a good flow. And I look down, like 4 minutes has gone by. Whereas about 53 days into this project, I had found this space in my mind where 32 hours could go by almost in a blink of just sort of high performance and functioning. I'm curious, actually, Joe, to ask you this in terms of, if we make a basketball reference, but my man Damian Lillard dropping that shot with 1 second to go to finish the series. But, there's obviously, you've seen this, where is the hoop just get bigger? Like, what are those moments where in a team setting, you find that flow and you're just clicking almost, I feel like I've observed that, but I don't know it so much from the team side of things.
I was telling a close friend of mine the other day, I think Sunday, that you hear people talk about being in a zone. When you're in a zone, you feel like you're outside of your body, watching yourself do what you do. It's the most unreal feeling. I don't even know how to explain it, but you feel like you're floating. You feel like everything is at ease. And I was telling this friend, like, you could shoot like that and know it's going in.
Totally.
And so I don't know what that is that taps into you like that, but it's real and it happens, and it's the most phenomenal feeling that you can have.
And that's, I think, what's so exciting about the time we're in now, because the ancient rituals of meditation and these quote zone conversations that we all like to talk about, the science has never really given us some framework to get into that or help others get to that space quickly. But I think the work Jess is doing with the biome, you should explore that a little, because I think that gut-brain connection that we're starting to peel back now shows us that there's an opportunity to start to tap into this in the future.
Right.
And I think Jess's work is really important in that space.
You want to speak to that, Jess?
Sure. So I'm an expert in the microbiome, and we're currently at Phylagen not working with the human microbiome, but I'm very...
Sorry, can you explain just
the
definition?
microbiome is the collection of bacteria, viruses, fungi that's everywhere on Earth. Everyone in this audience, you're mostly microbial. You're a walking bag of microbes, and your microbes really impact how you perform. There's been research showing that the microbiome is linked to basically how your brain functions. So I've moved out of that domain some, but when I was doing that work, about 8 years ago, I was working with Andy and the Red Bull high performance team, and Andy was really forward-leaning at that time and wanting to understand how the gut microbiome of high-performing athletes altered during extreme events.
but specifically the brain. We put a bunch of individuals in a very challenging environment over multiple days. And we just wanted to know, to Colin's point, why some people were succeeding in that space and others weren't. And it all came down to up here, and we just have no lens for that. And as obviously humans are the most complex things in the world. But it was Jess's work started to give us some very early insights into ways to start to think about that in a broader sense and through that understanding.
May I be the outsider as usual and point out from somebody who came to America and reaped all the benefits and rewards that this amazing country gave me is you don't have to win. You don't have to be a champion. You really don't. You can be knocked out in the biggest fight of your career and then make more money, hundreds of millions of dollars more, by selling a grill, okay? So life is not linear. This notion of I'm going to be a sky pilot, whatever that is, and you really do yourself. And the truth is you can start off as a B actor, Ronald Reagan, and become leader of the world's most powerful country and most popular. California, by the way, had a governor, 5th largest economy on planet Earth, bigger than the UK, okay? The guy that became the governor had a very unwieldy name, spoke Austrian. Ich kann auch sprechen ein bisschen Deutsch. Ich habe gelernt auf der Schule, aber ich spreche Hochdeutsch. He's Österreich. It's a different kind of German. What I said was, I'm really good looking. Check me out in German. And this guy started off as a bodybuilder, came to America, terrible actor, became the biggest star on earth. So the bodybuilding did almost nothing to help him with acting, and the acting perhaps helped him become the leader of the 5th largest economy on planet Earth. You can lose over here, and if you approach life, have the right thing, whatever the hell that is, have a few right things. Spread the risk, as you say on Wall Street. Don't bet all your money and all your talents and all your brain on 38 black, okay? Because there's a pretty good chance you'll lose. Spread the risk. I taught 6th grade in Spanish Harlem, where on the first day in school I learned Maricón la tuya tu madre. It does not mean good morning Jewish person. It meant something else. But at the same time, I worked at a deli in the afternoon, made some more money, and at night had a rock band, okay? So spread the risk. You never know what you're going to be doing. So all these people are superhuman beings that are fantastic doing what they're doing. I wish I could grow up and be just like them. But I'm telling you, you never know where success is going to come from. And there isn't anybody here who's had a linear life. I'll try it. Young lady, clearly you were in a beauty contest before I asked you this question. What did you do? What do you do now?
I'm a partner at EY.
A partner at EY. And what did you do before? Okay, forget you. Yeah, but the idea is you never know where that big fortune is going to come from. Thanks for killing everything.
Can I ask you a question? Okay, so you talked a lot about sort of this pragmatic approach to making money, the scorecard of that. I think we can all agree upon that in some regard. But you ultimately are known for being a musician, which most people would consider artistic, right?
No, I'm not. I'm known.
There's an artistic pursuit within you that isn't just a clearly linear path towards business.
No, it is. I'm Jewish. That helps. No, I'm telling you, it's in the DNA. We can't play ball. We, what's 12 inches in Jewish? Nothing. We don't do any of the stuff. What we do is we created the international banking system. We created the idea of interest. Without Jews, the banking system wouldn't be here. That's what we do. If you have a doctor, he's going to be a kike. If you have an accountant, he's one of them.
All right, Gene, let me ask you a different question. I don't know why this is... let me just ask
By the
you
way, you're not in LA, you're in Jewtown. Every manager, every lawyer, that's what we do. Put us on a basketball
Colin, any other
court.
questions for Gene?
What I want to get to, Gene, is to you, I feel like you're equating money to happiness. And I would like to go a little more existential with you in terms of true fulfillment or happiness as that equates to success.
I make a good living, thank God, so I can just speak from the truth. I don't give a fuck if anybody hears it. Here's the absolute truth. I've been told that money is the root of all evil, and that's the biggest lie since we crawled out of the caves as Australopithecines in Africa, Australopithecus africanus, which was discovered in what was then known as the Olduvai Gorge by Ellis Leakey. Look it up in your Funkin' Wagnalls. I'm here to tell you the God's honest truth, and that is, I'm enamored by romance and all kinds of things. That's not the way life works, unfortunately. It's wonderful, and I bow to your superior skills. Every step you took in godforsaken, you'll never find a Jew in those areas. Fuck that. We're through with, once we stop wandering through the desert, I'm done with nature. Give me a Ritz-Carlton, and I want to press the button and get instant gratification. Every guy with a yarmulke here says, yeah, that's true.
Gene,
Wait, I'm not done. So every step you took in the wilderness, I have no idea what you're doing up there. We have civilization here. Ants have ant hills. You go in the middle of nowhere where you got to be nice to a polar bear just to get a dead fish. So that's cool.
Only polar bears are in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, there's penguins.
I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. But the answer is every step costs money. Somehow you figure out how to make the money to get the flights and the hotels and the training. For 10 days, I'm going to do nothing and speak to no one. You're getting money from someplace.
so on that point, let me ask Andy something you told me at the pool.
Why do I keep having to follow Gene?
Andy, today you told me something that really caught my attention. You said who you are is the foundation of all the work that we, meaning you and your team, do with whether it's Jeff Bezos, whether it's Google, or whether it's other companies and organizations. What do you mean by who you are, and why is that so important?
So that framework comes from sort of just think of the long journey, as Gene put it. So, of course, there's short-term goals that are more about what you do, but the who are you really is what we look to cultivate, because ultimately that's your anchor. If you're grounded in what you stand for, why you're here, what's important to you, then no matter what we throw at you, you'll have a North Star to guide you. It's when you don't have a good foundation in those basic human premises that things can get in your way or distract you or pull you off course. So the sort of broad answer to that is that our work is always focused on really giving you a chance to look at yourself through a lot of different lenses and thinking about that question. Because what you do is less important because we can train you to do anything technically, the technical piece. So the output of that is when the sort of top performing communities around the world, they typically select for character and values. They don't select for technical capability. And that's sort of the sort of short answer to that question.
I want to ask Joe, I told you I'd come back to you, Joe, about a specific anecdote. Take you back to 1990, I believe, Game 3 of the NBA Finals. Mm-hmm. Detroit had just beat Portland, your team, to take a 2-1 lead in Portland, I believe. Mm-hmm. You got off the court, you called your mom, and she told you that your father had died while you were on the court. Mm-hmm. Tell us what happened next and how that played out, Joe.
For me, it was a similar moment in strength, in human strength. I walk off the court. We walk off the court. Everybody's sweating. We go in the locker room. Everybody's shaking hands. Great game. Someone says, "I need you to step outside." I think I'm going back to do an interview, whatever. I walk outside. Need to take a phone call. Pick up. My mom says, "Your dad died right when the game started." So we're up 2-1. So now it's like, okay, you're sweating. I'm in a uniform. Game just ended, and I take this phone call. I say to my mom, the owner of the team said, "Listen, you can take my private jet and go home." I grew up in Louisiana. So I tell my mom, I said, "Listen, the owner says I can take his private jet and come home." And she said, "Well, why would you do that?" And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Today is Sunday. You guys play Tuesday and you play Thursday." I said, "Yeah." She said, "Okay, well, you'll win Tuesday, you'll win Thursday. Sorry. And Friday, I need you to come home and bury your dad." And she said it with such confidence and nothing in her voice but, okay, this is what we're going to do. And for me, as a 27-year-old guy at that point, that moment showed me strength in the face of adversity more than anything else in my life. And my mom's like 5 feet tall. And so for me, learning strength was that day more than anything else in my life.
And so your team was up 2-1. You had to win 4 games to win the championship. You hadn't won in Portland in the previous
17 years.
17 years.
Yeah.
So your mom tells you to go win the next 2 games, no problem.
I told her that on the phone. I said, Mom, we haven't won here in 17 years. She said, that has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. And so I said, okay.
So what happened?
We win the next 2 games and win the championship in Portland. And I wake up Friday morning and fly home and bury my dad.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
Colin, I want to ask you, there was a moment in your journey, your 54-day journey, I believe it was day 35. You got a phone call on your sat phone from Paul Simon.
Yes.
Paul Simon, the singer, composer. What did you talk about?
Yeah, that was a very surreal moment for me. I had been posting on my Instagram every single day as I was sharing this journey, and I'd spent most of the time in silence. I deleted most of my podcast music so I could really be tapped into my mind, but there was a few days where I needed to pick me up, so on day 16 or so, I played one of my favorite all-time albums, which was Paul Simon's Graceland, and posted about it on my Instagram, thinking nothing of it. And then on day 35, I'm exhausted. I call home to my wife, who's kind of managing all the logistics in the background, and she says, hey, I actually need you to call this phone number. And I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, just trust me, call this number. So I call this number, ring. I'm like, hey, this is Colin from Antarctica. I have no idea who I'm calling. And he's like, oh, hey, it's Paul, Paul Simon. At this point, I'm like, I'm definitely losing my mind. I'm hallucinating. There's no way this is actually happening. But sure enough, Paul had reached out to say, hey, wow, Colin's listening to my music. I'd love to talk to him. It's an extraordinary thing going on. And we had a fantastic conversation. This is kind of where I was trying to direct Gene, but he didn't want to go there. But
I've been there all my life.
Was around. To me, I'm a terrible musician, but I've become to realize around my projects, I've thought of myself as a professional athlete for a very long time, but realizing through sort of the modality of storytelling, the work I've done in nonprofit, and really just harnessing the power of global media, 2 billion media impressions on my last project, which is we can inspire and impact people through many ways. And so I've started to think of myself less as an athlete and actually more as an artist. And what I do and put out into the world through the sort of creative platform of endurance sports is a way really to inspire others, not to watch me as the athlete in the arena, but actually take something from this impossible pursuit. And I've gotten millions of messages, you changed my life in this way. I finally started that business. I leaned into my relationship in my life more. And so Paul and I actually had this incredible conversation. I told him I admired Graceland, and we started talking about him going to South Africa, pre-apartheid, to record the drum beats, which was really sort of at the time kind of a risky thing to do, and around sort of creativity and art and the way that can impact people and inspire others through these sort of creative platforms, him as a more traditional artist, as a musician, but me sort of thinking about my journey in that way and the impact that we can have on others through sort of beating on our own craft.
So talking about his creative process while you were in Antarctica.
Absolutely, and for me, you don't talk to anybody for 35 days, and then you have a 20-minute conversation, which is a really long conversation from the bottom of the earth. But then I have the next, however many days, just replay the conversation over and over and over in my mind. And so it was an impactful conversation, to say the least.
So I mentioned at the top of this talk that we're going to try and create methods, tools, techniques that not only, you don't have to be a world-class athlete or performer or scientist to be able to take advantage of. And so I'm going to show you a short video in a minute of something that happened right here at Global Conference yesterday that illustrates those very tools. But first I want to ask Jessica. Jessica, you talk about, in our conversations, you've talked about reframing as something that you do. And recasting a negative into a positive when that happens. Tell us I'll let you define it. What is reframing and why do you find it powerful? And then please give us a couple examples.
Well, I never really had language for it. I think the fancy terminology would be cognitive reframing, but really there's a lot of conversation here about mothers and what we learned from our mothers. And my mother was the master of reframing. So any time that I was growing up, if we had what I would perceive as a negative encounter, a negative person, a negative experience, she would reframe what was happening And before I knew it, we were having turning a negative into a positive. And so I think that ability, what it really boils down to for me, is living in a very factual way versus creating a mental narrative that's not based on facts about what's going on. And I've found that I'm much calmer now and much happier and I think more successful when I make decisions that are based on facts versus my emotions, which are often can be linked to these assumptions that you make about what's going on or what somebody that you're interacting with.
So there was two examples that, one is you were in Alaska on a bike trip and you lost your dog sitter.
I did.
Why
Yes.
is that tell us about that reframe.
So just like Colin, you decided it would be a great idea to fly to Thailand and see what was going to happen. I thought it would be a great idea to ride my bicycle from Vancouver up to Dawson City to Kodiak, where my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, was fishing. And so I was about halfway through my trip, and my dog sitter said that she couldn't dog sit anymore. And so in that moment, I thought, I'm going to have to fly home because I couldn't find anyone to watch the dog. And by reframing the situation, I started putting together the facts and realized that I could actually fly my dog to me, get a child trailer and put it behind my bike and pull her with me. And so for the whole second half of the trip, I had my 70-pound dog in this child trailer, and I trained her to run, on the flat parts and down, and to jump in when we were going up, and it was an amazing experience. But,
Turning a negative into a positive.
Yep.
Reframing, interesting. Yeah. Andy, what are you hearing, all these anecdotes, these stories, these methods, what's the thread that you see among all these people and what they're doing?
Well, first, I think in our space, everybody has something to offer in this context. As Gene pointed out, it's not about being the best in the world, it's just improving, which most people want to do on your own sort of state. I think what Jessica brought up is a really important point, this idea that reframing, because humans, evolutionary, we see the worst. It was smart back in the day when you're walking through, the savannah, hear a rustle in the grass to think something's going to eat you because it sets you up to either run away or fight. And that's unfortunately stuck with us today. And I think this idea that we've all spoken to about putting yourself in a challenging space and how you overcome that challenge really does teach you a lot about yourself. It's a simple premise. And how you talk to yourself when that challenge comes up against you really is a significant part of how you're going to handle that. And teaching people the skills to navigate that space is really very simple, but sort of not very well, we're not spread out amongst the community. And what Colin said in terms of what he's doing, you don't want, when you face that challenge, you don't want that to be the first time you realize you haven't practiced what you should have practiced to set yourself up for that challenge. So we have a saying in our industry, don't let the first time be the first time. Make sure that you've prepared yourself and paid attention to some of your own lessons, and that way you can start to frame up, and as Jessica put it, you put yourself in a better chance to navigate that space, again, comfortably, and not have the threat overpower you.
So yesterday, Andy, you led a session in the pool of this hotel with about 35 people from our global conference audience who attended, put on wetsuits, got in the pool. Tell us just briefly what that was about and what the point was.
Well, first, hats off to the people who had the courage to come out to the pool in their business suits and business dresses and outfits and strip off in the generator room and put a wetsuit on and then jump in the pool with us. I think that's a first for Milken. But more importantly, again, this is a great exercise. The breath hold was sort of crafted up when we started doing a lot of big wave surf training. But in reality, we found out very quickly that once you put people in a challenging space like a breath hold, where they obviously can't talk to anybody else because their face is underwater, they start to get very quickly inside their own head. And we just teach you in that process, pay attention to what you're saying to yourself. As you feel yourself running out of air, which you will, how does that conversation go? Because the premise of the whole training is you could probably think, who thinks they've got a minute breath hold in the room? Put your hands up. Not very many. Anyone over that? Just a couple have done the training. You think you've got this sort of amount of time to do the training and hold your breath, but we know the world record for that particular exercise is about 11 and a half, 12 minutes. So we know you got this, you think you got that, and then you just push up against that space where you're on the edge and facing that challenge, and that's where you get to test yourself out. And through that experience, you learn a lot about yourself, and hopefully you can translate that back to more relevant parts of your life.
So let's roll that video. It's about 45 seconds or so from yesterday.
So we're here this evening at Milken to run a human performance session. The goal of this session is to give people an opportunity to test themselves out in an uncommon environment. Once we get into the water, we're going to do a modified breath hold session where they get just to see how they respond to a little bit of a challenge. We lay things out for them, so it's very easy, it's very progressive, but we'll also have a bit of competition at the end to see who really wants to push it a bit further. Okay, let's do our breathe up. Nice and easy. Breathe in. Pause, breathe out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Pause, breathe in. 15 second signal. It gives me a nice, strong, don't lift it up, but on the top. Okay, 20 second signal. Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to say we're coming up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And lift your head. Just give me 3 breaths. 2, 3. Okay. And then he'll go straight back up into the next breather. Relax. All right, take it easy, guys. Let your arms go. Let your back relax. Let your legs relax. Nice and easy. If you have to come up early, just gently. 1 minute signal in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1 minute signal. 3, 2, 1. 2 minute signal. Nice and easy. Good job. Great. 2.5 minutes, guys. Amazing.
This was effing awesome. I've never been able to do this before. I've tried like to swim underneath the length of a pool underwater, and being through this was fantastic. Taught me to be calm and just to not think about it. You know, if you can get out of your own head, it works. I thought I was going to hit 30 seconds, but I didn't think I was going to get to 2.5 minutes. So this was just incredible.
Absolutely incredible experience, completely transformative. Just unbelievable difference between getting in the pool, what you think you can do, and what you're actually able to achieve. These guys are amazing. Only at Milken.
How long could you hold your breath before, and how long could you hold your breath now?
I thought I could do between 30 seconds and a minute, and the last breath hold was almost 3 minutes. Absolutely amazing. And that was just the first time trying. Really incredible.
Yay.
All right, so pretty amazing. Is there anybody in the room here who was in the pool yesterday?
Bill was.
Oh, good. All right.
And I just want to say one thing. That's the power of these tools. Once people feel that experience of achieving something and they get that energy from pushing beyond, that's the beauty of that statement at the end where it makes a difference. That's where I think the real power is in this stuff.
So, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, the first gentleman we saw in the video, was that Bill Ty?
Yeah, Bill. He's sitting right here in the front.
Bill Ty, who rang the bell at NASDAQ last week, IPOing his company Zoom, right?
Yeah, well done, Bill.
So, Andy, artificial intelligence, we've had a lot of conversations at Global Conference. In fact, a really interesting one this morning, also talking about the ethical implications and the technology and where it's taking not just our society, but our workforce, our professions, and so forth. I wanted to ask you quickly, we have about 6 minutes left. I wanted to ask you about the impact of AI as you see it on corporate workforces, on all of us and our children, in terms of how can human performance tools of the kind you're talking about mitigate against some of the changes that we fear that may not happen, as well as the ones we fear that may happen, as well as the ones that we don't even know about yet that may happen?
Because we've got a short bit of time, but really quickly, obviously, as the humans are such a complex entity, the tools that AI is bringing to help us understand human capability is never been seen before. So that's a real positive. Obviously, there's the work that's being done on the future of workforce, and that's showing that the machine and the AI agents will take a lot of that work over. But for us, it's a huge opportunity, because if you think of what's left, what can we now focus on with the humans, with these tools to really explore. So you're thinking about things like compassion, creativity, critical thinking, the ability to show empathy to others, emotional intelligence. All those skills remain a core construct of fundamental human behavior. And now we're left with the machine taking all the rubbish away, the ability to start to focus on that part of humanity. So making humans better humans, or super empathy, super compassion, super creativity. That's the opportunity we see ahead. So as much as it can be kind of Skynet on one side of the equation, we see it as a huge chance to now really explore a much deeper consciousness within the humanity, and the human performance world is digging deep into that space right now.
So on that note, I hope that we have achieved our goal of disabusing the idea that human performance is really mostly about athletics or physicality. It's certainly about that, but so much more, as you've heard from a lot of people, including the athletes in this group. And I'd like to, toward the end of this session, just play a brief audio clip by a woman named Brene Brown. She's a professor at I believe, the University of Houston. She's an author. I think she has a Netflix series coming out, if it's not already out. And this quote is from an NPR interview she gave a couple weeks ago on the two sides of the same coin, courage and vulnerability. Can we play that clip, please?
Everyone wants to be brave. No one wants to be vulnerable. And we will spend the entirety of our lives is spent trying to reconcile that. If you're not in the arena, if you're not putting yourself out there, if you can control the outcome, you're not being brave. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is actually, in research terms, our most accurate measure of courage. It's the willingness to show up and be seen when you can't control how it's going to go.
I play that because it's a powerful reminder that as we all try and, we're all sort of wearing the same things, we're all kind of using the same vernaculars, as any polite society does, but, to achieve great things, we all have to, as these people have said in their own way, push the edge. And so, Andy, with a few minutes left, as people leave here, as people think about, okay, human performance, these are all sort of world-class athletes, performers, scientists, what have you. How can what can I do? What tools can people grab onto, lean into, if you will, to take this conversation forward themselves or with their organizations?
Great question. I think the fundamental premise is you've got to practice this stuff. You've got to try it. You've got to explore. Again, back to the early idea, don't let the first time be the first time. You've got to continually put yourself out there. And the sort of work we're trying to achieve in sort of our programs is to put people in either very simple situations like you saw in the pool, very complex situations. But the whole premise of the training is to prepare you with the mindset, with the tools, with the frameworks to enable yourself to be success in all other areas. And the who are you, being openly vulnerable, is what that training will do. There's no hiding in the pool. We'll see very quickly. You can't control that after a point, and how you respond then is that sort of first lesson. So giving you an opportunity to put yourself out there, challenge yourself in an uncommon way, and being comfortable and learning how to be uncomfortable with whatever happens really is the first premise of the training that we sort of try and set up.
Gene, there was an interview you did with Australian TV a few years ago in which you described the perhaps the one time that really gets you where you are vulnerable on stage. When you see a young boy in Kiss makeup with his dad, and they're given the Kiss salute or what have you, and they're experiencing that together.
Which means I love you in sign language, yes.
So tell us why that's vulnerable to you. You actually broke down, your voice fell out of gear during that interview.
It happens all the time.
So what about that?
Well, after they buy tickets and spend $250 for the tickets, I told you I was the wrong guy for this thing. It is, you got to pay for $1.5 million production somehow. But yes, after business is taken care of, it is that moment when I realize that music, whether it's our band or your own favorite band, even Paul Simon, is the soundtrack of our lives. At funerals, at weddings, at births, music is the stuff we hum in the shower and so on. It's more than that. And then when I see You know, when I was a kid, rock and roll was the separation between Lawrence Welk and your mom and dad's music and that trash, that boogie, woogie, boogie, you're shaking your hips. Don't do that kind of thing. And when I first came to America, it was pre-Beatles. I heard Chuck Berry and Fats Domino and that music, and, you know, white people can't move. And all I knew was all of a sudden I was moving like I felt it first, because we didn't know about hips and stuff, you know, because mom and dad talked about that. But then I understood rock and roll, jazz, blues, everything, the history of it, it all came from black music, specifically American slaves, shamefully from America's past. Once you understand that, you understand where all this stuff came from, and then to actually see that it can unite families and get that little kid for the first time going like this, and going, this is huge. It brings families together. It doesn't have to tear them apart.
Ladies and gentlemen, he has a soul. He has a soul.
Gene's got a big heart.
Ladies and gentlemen, I need him to validate me.
So we're out of time, but at the end of that interview, Gene, you took off your glasses and you let the camera focus in on your moist eyes, because that just speaking about it had hit you so emotionally powerfully. Would
There
you
is
take off your glasses
emotion,
for us
there is
now?
love, there is money is not the most important thing, but it is. The Ethiopian woman on the Kalahari Desert who's got the child in her arm, all you need is love. That's a lie. First you need money to buy the food and the water, and then you can have as much love as you want,
so
because if the only thing she's got is love, that child will lovingly die in her arms.
So you heard it,
okay?
ladies and gentlemen. The thing we want you to remember most is it's all about money. All right? We're out of time, but I want to give it up for our moms, because our moms are really important. They made us these guys who we are. Thank you to Colin. Thank you to Gene. Thank you to Jessica and Joe and Andy. If you want to talk to these folks, they'll be right over here off the stage.
My man.
Thank you.
Good job, mate.